Reading the Revelation chapter 2, starting with verse 8. Write this letter to the angel of the church in Smyrna. Smyrna is the town. There's some kind of house church that's located in this town, maybe several house churches where believers would meet for Sunday worship and teaching and so forth. And so we find this town is still in existence today. Izmir is the town today. And so the angel is written this message to the church in Smyrna by John the Revelator. This is the message from the one who is the first and the last, who was dead but is now alive. Of course, speaking of Jesus himself. Kind of like our image of the phoenix bird rising from the ashes, who was dead but is now alive, the resurrected Christ, who promises hope and eternity to all who follow him. Verse 9, I know. Here again, just like in the message to Ephesus, the church there, Jesus says, I know. I know what's going on in your church. I know what's going on in your spiritual journey. I know, which again can be comforting or it can be a warning to us. I know about your suffering and your poverty. What we find here is that there were Christians, because of being loyal to Christ and not deifying the Emperor Domitian, were suffering financially. They were suffering for their faith financially. But you are rich. Real riches belong to eternity's account. And sometimes in our day-to-day world, we get focused on finances, focused on material blessings. But when hard times come, sometimes with those hard times, finances become a strain. And Jesus says, but remember, if you have me, if you're living for me, if your allegiance is to me, if you love me, if you're in my kingdom, you're rich beyond measure. I know the blasphemy of those opposing you. They say they are Jews, but they are not. What was happening was that Jews had some exemptions from the Roman Empire that they did not need to suffer. And so many Christians were Jews that had become believers. But the Jewish synagogue leaders had distanced themselves from the Christians. And so Christians were the ones that were not exempt from the Roman Empire and encountered the most suffering. So here we find here, they say they are Jews, but spiritually they really are not, because their synagogue belongs to Satan. Verse 10, don't be afraid of what you are about to suffer. Whenever we go through suffering times, hard times, difficult situations, trials, tribulations, we need to place our trust and our hope in Christ. He will take us through the hard times. Yes, sometimes God saves us from the hard times, but sometimes he takes us through the hard times. The devil will throw some of you into prison to test you. You will suffer for 10 days, probably means a limited time. But if you remain faithful even when facing death, I will give you the crown of life. In this church, there was a leader called Polycarp. Polycarp was put to death for his faith. Polycarp, before he was set aflame by fire for his faith, stated, 86 years have I served Christ. I will not blaspheme his name. And then 156 AD, he was martyred for his faith, for his devotion to Christ. So certainly some Christians in the town of Smyrna were put to death for their faith. Then he says, I will give you the crown of life. The crown here is the word Stephanos. It's where we get our son's name Stephen from, Stephanos. It means a crown or a wreath on the head that was given in the Olympic Games. And so back then they didn't have gold, silver, and bronze medals, but they would put a wreath around the head of the victor, of the winner. And so here he's saying, when you come through these difficult times a winner, you're going to have my crown, and my crown is life ever after. Verse 11, anyone with ears to hear must listen to the Spirit and understand what he says to the churches. Whoever is victorious will not be harmed by the second death. Of course, the second death is what Jesus talked about. He said, don't be afraid what people can do to your physical body. Be afraid of the one who can condemn your soul. And so here the second death is a reference to eternal destiny without God, without his presence. So we find here the main key of the church of Ephesus is to love God, to love others, and to love outsiders, but also stand for the truth. Truth and love must go together. But now in the church of Smyrna, where no complaint seems to be aired against them, is that they must hang tough through suffering, even if it means death. Well, thank you for joining us today and listening. May God bless you and keep you.